Good evening. My name is Arlene Herson. The name of the show is Getting to Know You, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Tonight, we're going to get to know a man who might be referred to as the White Knight of show business. He is as well known for his strong belief in religion and family as he is for his singing and his white buck shoes. He has had his own television show, written numerous books, starred in many movies, and his recordings have sold over 45 million. He is the personification of apple pie, motherhood, and the American flag. A man to be proud of. He is Pat Boone, and let's get to know him. Welcome. Oh, you're doing that.
And I'm humble, too.
Yes, okay. Well, but you're phenomenal. I mean, in addition to all the things that you've done, and looking at you, you look so sensational. I can't believe that you're a grandfather.
I can hardly believe it myself. But it's a fact. I've got two, thanks to my daughter Lindy and her husband Doug, and little Ryan and Jessie, a boy and a girl. And Debbie is expecting in late July. So that'll be number 3, or maybe 3 and 4. Who knows?
Wow, okay.
That would be nice.
Yeah, but you got an early start. I mean, you look terrific.
I really did. Yeah, I was 7 years old when we got married.
No, now, come on, that's a little exaggeration. How old were you when you
We
got
were
married?
19.
You were 19? Okay, now everybody knows how strict you are with your 4 daughters. And how they really have to listen to Mom and Dad. I've read several of your books, and I know how you feel about it.
Yeah.
But you eloped. You got married without your parents' permission.
Yeah.
Why did you do that?
Well, probably not for a good reason. I know I wouldn't want my kids to do it for the reason that we did, but that's the point. When you're 19 years old, you don't always make the most rational decisions. As it worked out, we were very, very fortunate, and it's been a happy marriage. We've had some problems, I think partly because we did marry so young, and there's always that restless feeling later that maybe you missed something by getting married so young. But the reason that we did was that my wife's folks, Red Foley, and his new wife, his former wife and Shirley's mother had died, and he'd married again, and then he had this great opportunity to go do television in Springfield, Missouri, and start a big television show called the Ozark Jubilee. And so he was moving away, and my folks had been afraid that we were too serious. And we would break up, we'd have arguments, and we'd break up, and then we'd get back together, and every time we got back together, it was with new passion and commitment and deeper love, and my folks thought, man, if this keeps going, they're going to get married, and Pat's going to have to drop out of school, and he's never going to get his education, and it's just too soon. So they had asked us not to date for a while, not to date steady, not even to date at all, just take a breather. And so the pressure was building during that time, and then Red Foley was going to move away, and Shirley and I felt like that was the end of the world, and that we weren't going to see each other again, and I felt like, gee, she'll go to Springfield, she'll meet somebody else and get married. She felt the same thing about me, and we said, hey, let's get married. And so we did. It was rather an impulsive thing. My folks were shattered because they were sure that the next thing I'd have to get a job, drop out of school, that would be the end of my future. As it turned out, I was even more serious, more determined to get my college education, and Shirley felt the same way. And so I did, and eventually graduated with honors at Columbia University in New York. But it wasn't, I don't think that we gave ourselves as much or as many advantages as young couples ought to have. I think if we'd waited another couple of years, it would have been better. But we're not complaining now. Okay, and if you waited a few years, as you mentioned, she was going to move. Oh yes, they were moving within the month. Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, what would you have done? I mean, you still have one unmarried daughter. 3 of them are married. Yeah. What would you have done, knowing the kind of father you are, if one of your daughters eloped? Well, there's not much you can do, but there's a, and I hope Laurie's not where she can hear this. That's the youngest one, and it's it's a possibility she could do it. The other 3 have married, wonderful church weddings, and I'd hate to see Laurie miss that. Right now, though, she's in Nashville, Tennessee, and away from us. She's the first of our girls to actually live for any length of time away from us. And so she's in Nashville. Of course, my folks are there, and a lot of my friends and family. But she's on her own, and her boyfriend, her fiancé, they're engaged to be married in August. He lives in Arkansas, and he's a singer and a guitarist, songwriter, and he's been in Nashville a good bit making his first album. And so we realized that it's just possible that the next phone call could be Laurie and Harry saying, guess what, we decided not to wait for the wedding. And if that were to happen, we'd say, well, God bless you. We'll just pray that you'll be as fortunate as we were. And of course, as I say, Laurie's 22 now, and so it's already 3 years later than when Shirley and I did it. So they could make it. They could make it fine.
Yeah. Okay. It must have been very tough with your ideas and your beliefs to have brought up your old-fashioned ideas, I meant to say.
Yes,
okay,
they really are.
To bring up girls, particularly in today's modern age.
Yes, in Hollywood, California.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? I can't imagine, and we've already done it. But it was rough because it's not just a Hollywood phenomenon anymore. Although, as the girls were reaching their teens, I think there was a lot more drugs, a lot more promiscuous, permissive sex behavior, and also a lot of occult religions and just all kinds of bizarre things that were sweeping through the kids in junior high, high school. And of course that's now happened and is happening all over the country. It's very, very difficult. I talked to a guy today, very responsible family in New York. He thinks that he's done a good job of raising his kids and staying in close communication with them and trying to impart what he believes are the best kind of values. And yet his 18-year-old boy has just been apprehended dealing drugs to the tune of $1,000 a week in New York. This kind of thing is now rather commonplace all over the country. But when my girls were just entering their teens, and this was about 10 years ago, they were offered drugs by their friends by the time they were 13, 14, 15 years old. All their friends were having sexual affairs with their boyfriends. Some of the parents were even indulging them in it, allowing boyfriends to come home, said we'd rather have them in bed at our house than out in a car or a motel somewhere, and letting them go away for weekends. And our girls were growing, these were some of their best friends. And so imagine the difficulty of our trying to say, girls, that's not the way you do it. And there's a better way, and you're going to pay a big price for that. And that was one of the things we stressed most, was that there's a price tag attached to everything. There's no such thing as free drugs or free sex or free anything. There is a price tag attached, and the bill comes due, if not now, later. So we stayed in close communication, and the girls were very frank with us. We've discovered a few things since they've been grown and married that we didn't know about then, but not much. And not the really serious things. Not a one of them ever took any drugs.
Yeah.
Not a one of them engaged in any of those sexual things. Not a one of them got involved in any...
Okay, but what did they do?
Well, they drank some.
Okay.
They drank, they smoked. Not in any regular way, they didn't pick up any habits or anything. But they had, the kind of usual sort of teenage sneaking around, going to parties and things. There were several times when the girls would go spend the night with their girlfriends, and they'd sneak out and get into relatively harmless kinds of things. And so they were normal. They were normal, but thank God they did not slip into the kind of life and personality damaging things that are so prevalent now that's hard for any parents to keep their kids from.
I agree, and you were very lucky. We have to take a break right now.
Okay.
We'll be right back. We're talking to Pat Boone in the dressing room of Club A Dinner Theater in Sayreville, New Jersey, and we'll be right back after these messages, so please stay with us. We're back with my very special guest, Pat Boone. We were just talking about some of the difficulties your daughters could have gotten involved in and didn't.
Yeah.
But, however, I was shocked to read in your book, The Honeymoon is Over, that there was a period of time when you were living in Beverly Hills, California, that you actually smoked, drank, gambled. The Pat Boone?
Yep.
Really?
Yeah, because it's really hard to, as I say, live in that environment, be exposed to it all the time, and not after a while begin to think, well, gee, why not? Everybody else does. They seem to be doing fine. And there was a period in the 60s when the whole entertainment business seemed to be going in a different direction than what I was used to. Because when I got started, there were movies like April Love, State Fair, Bernadine, and Journey to the Center of the Earth, and, family kind of things. Then came Butterfield 8 and The Hustler, and, I can't remember all of them now, but then came this rating system of the PPG or G, PG, and R and X and all that. And more, G-rated films just didn't do well. And there was electronic rock and music. And we were reaching the place where anything goes. And the entertainers who seemed to break all the rules were the ones who did the best. And so I felt that I was going to have to make some compromises to fit into the business. And I went to the parties and I had a drink, and I saw that it didn't bother me. I had another drink, and I discovered I had, perhaps because I'm very athletic and healthy, I had a pretty high tolerance for alcohol. It didn't knock me down. I think the only time I was ever half drunk in my life was after a movie scene I did with Debbie Reynolds, and Vincent Minnelli, the director, just kept pouring champagne down me all afternoon and into the evening doing this scene. And I think now, as I look back, he did it on purpose, because I was supposed to get drunk in the scene and pass out, and I almost did. And then I had to drive home after we finished that. Well, I liked going to the parties, and I liked the young girls, the young actresses looking at me after I just told a funny and a rather bawdy joke, saying, "Hey, you're not as square."
Joke.
Oh yes, yeah. You're not as square as I thought. And I said, "No." And I sort of liked that, and gradually I was drifting away from my wife. She didn't seem to want to fit into all that stuff. And furthermore, she didn't like me very much when I did, because I was no longer the guy that she married, you know. And so we drifted apart, and there was a time when I really thought we were going to just break up. We lived together about 2 years, admitting secretly, sort of privately to each other, that there was no love there. And I think our kids knew it. They were reaching their teens. They saw there was very little affection, if any. And I think that must have unsettled them. Then there was a great spiritual turnaround, which we've written about and talked about, because we saw that it was going to take some miracles to put our lives back together, because you can't just make up love again after 15 years. And Shirley was the first to make her new commitment. Just turned her life over to God and said, "Love Him through me. I don't know what love is anymore." And I saw that she did really have more love and a greater capacity to love and to cope with the problems with the kids and the crazy schedule that we lived under, and that was so full of stress and strain. And I got the benefit of this change in her, because she was loving me and I hadn't changed. I was still selling out. But I gradually, after 6 months or so, decided that I needed to make that same kind of commitment. I did. Then the girls each saw what had happened to us and saw our arms around each other and holding hands, and that we really were in love again, and they wanted what we had. And it was at that crucial time in their lives when, if it hadn't happened, I think surely one or more, or maybe all the girls, would have just naturally gravitated into the things that all their friends were doing. But just at that crucial moment, each one said, "Hey, we'd like to have what you have." And they each one made her own special commitment, complete commitment to God, which didn't make her some kind of a zombie or a robot or anything. It just meant that she had a special sense of her own identity and direction and what life is about, and meant that when she was with her friends, she made good choices and wise decisions that we didn't know about till later, because she didn't want to surrender her own identity. You know, she didn't want to compromise herself. And so it was not anything we did, but it's something they observed in us and they wanted. And so it kept our family together, our marriage together. And now it's great, because for the last few years I haven't had any sense that my career or my life depended on agents or fate or the next record or any of those things. I do what I do because I enjoy it, you know, and I get a kick out of it. Other people seem to enjoy it more. And my family now is 3/4 grown and married, just one to go.
Yeah.
And Shirley and I are getting excited about the next 30 or 40 years just together, she and I.
Okay, I kind of wonder what that magic was that made you turn around and go on the path that you had started.
Well, it was crisis, for one thing, and running out of answers. We knew that we didn't have the answers. We couldn't put it back together. We were like Humpty Dumpty. But we knew, if my watch goes on the blink, if I possibly can, I'm going to send it back to the manufacturer. So we just turned our lives back to the manufacturer and said, hey, fix us, we're broken.
Okay.
Put us back together, and he did. And it was just that simple, and it's just that real. And the Bible became our instruction book, that's all. It's full of practical advice on how to live.
Okay, but there was one time in your life when the original church that you belonged to was the Church of Christ, I believe. Now, you were disfellowshipped.
Disfellowshipped.
Oh, disfellowshipped. Yes. Is that like
you really
excommunicated? Yeah, right.
It is almost like, yeah.
Okay, why?
We were just declared no longer members, even though we were going there every Sunday night, every Sunday, Wednesday, because we got too religious for them, in a sense at least.
Which means?
Our doctrine, I mean, their doctrine no longer could confine or define who we were and what was happening to us. Because we were saying, hey, it's real. It's not just playing church. You know, there's a God, the God of David, the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the God of the Bible. He works miracles. He changes things. And they were saying, well, hey, wait a minute, you're getting too religious. And we'd already ruled out the possibility of miraculous or supernatural things in our church group. And yet we were coming to church saying, hey, we prayed at home, and Shirley's wrist was broken and it was healed. And we prayed for somebody else and they had cancer and they're healed. And we had a $2 million financial miracle, and it was solved like that. And other kinds of real answers. And then I wrote a book called A New Song, which became a bestseller and led to that disfellowshipping.
Okay, it was because of your book, it was because of your belief in
and
miracles.
The experiences, yeah.
Okay, and I want to talk more about that, but we're going to take another break because I want to hear about some of your miracles.
Okay.
We're talking with Pat Boone at the Club Benet Dinner Theater, and we'll be right back after these messages, so please stay with us.
Heard some of this.
We're back with my guest, Pat Boone. You just started to tell us about some of the miracles that happened to you, and your commitment, of course, we're all aware of. You said something before that I just don't want to pass. You said that Shirley's, your wife's wrist was healed from praying?
Yep. Yes. And Shirley sometimes says, Pat, don't tell that. Because first of all, nobody will, very few people will really believe it. And secondly, she says, I don't know that it was broken. Now, I believe it was broken, and the only other eyewitness who saw it says it had to be broken. And doctors I've talked to said there's no way that a wrist could look like that one did and not be broken. But she says, well, but we didn't have it x-rayed. But even if it weren't broken, if it were just severely bruised, what had happened was, this was a few days before Christmas. And she walked down, it was early in the morning, I hadn't come down yet, and she bought some Bibles for Christmas gifts to people, really nice Bibles with their names on them and everything. And she had them in a window seat in our recreation room, and the seat is sort of heavy itself, and then there's a big heavy cushion on top of it. And she went in and she took a couple of these things out, and she pushed the seat up and thought it would stay. And as she had something in this hand and took something over here with this hand, the seat fell and went right across her wrist with a very loud and a very heavy thud. And she lifted this thing up and it was killing her. It was excruciating pain. And as she looked, the thing just swelled up. It was about twice its size. It immediately began to just turn blue. Now that means that there's a broken blood vessel at least. And so it was swollen and it was hurting, and now it was just immobile. And she walked into the kitchen, and our maid was up, and she saw that. And she said, oh, Ms. Boone, she said, that's broken. Call Dr. Newman. And it was only about a little after 7 in the morning. Shirley said, oh, he won't be there yet. No, she said, I'll just wait. She said, Mrs. Boone, it's you've got to do something about it. You can't just wait. And about that time, there's a little rap on the door, and a man had come delivering a couple other Bibles that were special. He brought them to the house. He was a devout Jewish Christian. And that may sound like a contradiction in terms, but it's not. And so he walked in the kitchen, and Shirley says, look, John. And he said, oh. He says, Shirley, do you believe? What he meant was, do you believe God can heal that? Shirley just thought, do you think God can help you with it or something? And she said, yes. He said, then let's pray. He put his hand on her wrist, very lightly, because obviously it was very tender. It hurt like crazy. Put his hand and began to pray, and just in a matter of a few seconds, Shirley says, the pain went, it was gone. And she began to just thank God because, for that the pain was gone. And John just says, I'm bound for glory. And he went out the door and was gone. About that time, I walked in the kitchen, and Shirley just held out her hand to Lucinda, our maid, and said, Lucinda, the pain is gone. And as she held out her hand, I couldn't see from my point of view, but Lucinda and Shirley both saw the swelling just go, right back down, just like that, and her hand was perfectly normal. And she turned it like this, and then she turned to me. She said, "Pat, look." And when I looked, her wrist was perfectly normal. I didn't know what had happened. All I saw was, obviously a normal wrist. If I could have been on the other side of her, where Lucinda was, where John had been, I would have seen her wrist twice that size suddenly go zoom right down. And Lucinda just slumped into her chair and says, "Ms. Boone," she says, "nobody believed that." Well, whether it was broken, as I believe it was, or whether it was just badly battered and bruised, it was still a miracle. It was a miracle it happened just like that because some people believed and prayed, and God says, "Okay," and it was done. And so when we went to church and telling people things like that had happened to us, I talked about a $2.5 million financial miracle. It's too long to go into now, except that I owned the Oakland Oaks basketball team, and it was a terrible loser. The whole league was going down the drain. Nobody wanted to buy this team. I couldn't get a partner. I couldn't get loans. I hadn't intended to be the owner, but that's another story. A guy took advantage of me and my confidence in him, and suddenly I found myself holding a $2.5 million bag, the Bank of America breathing down my neck, saying, "You pay us by Friday, or we will foreclose on your house. We'll attach everything you've got," and virtually drive me into bankruptcy after close to 20 years, well, over 15 years of success. I thought I had it made. But a miracle happened, and at the last possible second, a man we didn't know flew from Washington, D.C. to California to the Bank of America, said, "I want to buy the Oakland Oaks. How much?" $2.5 million, flew back to Washington. I've never yet met the man. And, things like that will develop your faith.
A miracle. Okay, I heard that with your $2.5 million investment that you went to maybe 10 games, and it cost you about $200,000 a game. We have to take a break.
$250,000 a ticket. Nice seats. But
Right. We have to take a break again. We're talking to Pat Boone at the Club Benet Dinner Theater, and we'll return right after these messages, so please do not go away. We're back with my guest, Pat Boone. You have had a terrific life, a very special life. You've had a lot of ups and downs, but...
And it's only half over.
Yeah, well, I would say not even that, but is there anything you'd change, looking back now, that you
Only thing I can think of at all, really, is I'd like to have a son. I'd just like that experience, and I tried, as you heard in our show tonight, but although I kid about it, and I love my daughters, and I'm not at all frantic about it. That's the only thing I would have changed. I'd like to have had a boy.
Okay, well, maybe.
Yeah,
maybe,
that's
I mean,
right.
God willing. Okay.
Yeah.
I thank you very much for being a guest on my show. I can't tell you,
Enjoyed it,
I
Arlene.
thoroughly
Really
enjoyed
have.
meeting you and getting to know you. I hope that you have enjoyed getting to know Pat Boone. I know that I certainly have, and that you'll join us again next week. Meantime, good night. It's been a pleasure getting to know you.